So you start.
Hi. Welcome to Two Authors, Books, and a Beverage. Today, of course, I have my coffee, so that's my beverage.
I'm empty-handed. I forgot to grab some.
Empty-handed. Oh, well,
Sorry.
okay. Two authors in a book. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. We're glad you joined us for this month of July, and we're hoping you enjoy your summer months. Today, we're so excited that we have a special guest joining us, Tori Baker. She is the CEO, president of the Salt Lake Film Society, which is located in Salt Lake City, Utah, and it's nonprofit, and it has it's about independent films, right, Tori?
Yeah, it's we operate 2 theaters, and we also have a mission to educate, advocate, and inform about and through cinema. So we have 28 projects, actually.
Wow.
Post-COVID, we have less projects than that, but we do things like cultural tours, and we also do screenwriting projects, and we have a program called MAST, which is a media accelerator studio for filmmakers.
That's what I was looking. I was looking at your bio. Oh my gosh. I have to read this through real fast because it's amazing. You are a busy person. Okay. During 2020 COVID-19, she founded At Home Arts, a tech platform for art house cinema nationwide. Founded maskstudio.org, which you were mentioning, for the tech-enabled and animation arts. She founded the National Art House PSA project, producing PSAs to communicate the mission of nonprofit cinema across the U.S. She co-founded a federal 506 organization for Utah entrepreneurs and co-launched the first National Art House Convergency Conference, AHC. Mm-hmm. Now, Tori is a University of Utah College of Fine Arts Distinguished alumni. She is a member of these boards, Tanner Lecture Series at the University of Utah, 10K Alumni, National Association of Theater Operators Committees for Diversity and Inclusion memberships. Film is your passion, right?
Right.
And
right.
In her spare time.
What spare time?
I know. She teaches screenwriting. And we as authors are interested in knowing what steps we can take maybe in taking our fiction book and turning it into a screenplay, or if that's possible, or, just give us some ins and outs of screenwriting.
Ins and outs of screenwriting. Okay. Well, and I run a screenwriters project called the Utah Screenwriters Project, where we've fostered over 120 writers through that project who vary in the way that they want to take their work to the community. So some are television pilots, and some want to write a feature film and direct it, and some just want to be writers. So I think that if, your primary listenership are probably writing novels, correct? They're writing romance novels. So for novelists to want to write a screenplay, probably the first step is to learn the format, because the format is going to be very different than writing a novel. And it's going to be, unlike if you were a screenwriter and then you decided to write a novel, which I've known people who've done that as well, you start to go, oh, wow, I've got to add all this detail. You're going to strip down that detail in a screenplay format because it's a visual format that it's going to end up in. And a screenplay is a guidepost. It's, definitely, forming the whole story for the director, but it's a visual medium, film, television, a serial on Netflix, anything like that is going to be a visual medium. So ultimately you're writing something that's going to be translated by other artists into that visual medium. So you have to know the form. So it's very much a craft. There are a couple of places you could go to look for the form. My friend Dave Trottier, who lives in Park City, actually has written a book called The Screenwriter's Bible.
And I have that.
Yeah, That is a really great place to start. Dave also works on the side to, for anybody who gets to the point where they finish a script, he works on the side to do these kind of really deep evaluations of your screenplay and your story. So he's come out and discussed screenplay form with our writers in the past, and that's been really great because whether you want to write a montage or you're just trying to write a dialogue scene for two people, knowing how to put that in the proper format is really important. You can do that on Word. I have a friend who's a director who still does it on Word, and he's a very famous director. He directs The Walking Dead, and he's directed Fargo, and he's very, very, you know, prolific in how much he directs, especially for television these days. But he still, when he goes to write a screenplay, he will still write that in Word and just tab forward to make the form work for dialogue. But there are also free softwares anymore that you can use, some open source softwares for screenplays that will allow you to type faster in a way because you don't have to think about the format, because every time you tab, it's automatically going to put you in the right place for dialogue and things like that. So the form is probably the first place to start. Get familiar with the form, read a few for screenplays. Screenplays are available online, a lot of times for free, and you can also find them just in the bookstores as well, in the filmmaking section. So the more screenplays that you read as well, you start to get very familiar with the format. Just be cautious that a lot of screenplays that you read will be in their, what they call their final format, because they've published them. So many of the ones that you read will be in a format that's slightly different, which is the shooting script, as opposed to the spec script, which is what you would be writing if you were tackling a script.
Mary, you have a question?
Oh, I do. I know I've got a lot to learn as far as the formatting, and I do have the Bible, and I've kind of started, and it is a lot different than the novel. And so I understand that. But once a person has gone through all the formatting, learned what they need to do, and they feel that they've got a screenplay, do you suggest, what's the next step? An agent, or do you submit? What do you do with it?
You don't edit like you do a novel after you're done and have an editor go through it?
No, you wouldn't do a paid editor. You could do somebody like Dave Trottier who would go through your script and tell you it's weak here, or it's strong there, or lean into this. You know, there's a few rules in terms of, you know, they like to say go in late, come out early when it comes to a scene. So when you're doing your second and third and fourth drafts, you want to really make sure that your scenes are really tight and that you're coming in late and leaving early, and that you're, you know, that it's a 3-act structure or a 5-act structure. If you're shooting for that, typically a 3-act structure is what most screenplays are in. So, you know, next steps is a little bit different. That's, you know, you could do an entire 2 hours on next steps. It's, I mean, you know, the industry of film and the way it works is challenging for writers to break in, especially if you're not located in Hollywood and New York and the kind of the central areas. It's not impossible, but with a spec script, which is what they define, you know, a script that is unknown and is a story that people would maybe perhaps want to buy. Galaxy Quest, for instance, was a spec script and was sold on spec. Those scripts do need to be represented if you're looking at a Hollywood pathway. So represented means an agent or a management company that's willing to represent your story and your script and you as a screenwriter. That's pretty difficult to break into. Most management companies and screenwriting agents are really not going to accept. You can send them spec scripts as samples, but it's probably, I would dare say, more difficult than in the novel industry when you're trying to get published, because there's just there's just so much out there in the world these days for them to be looking at. So I would say, therefore, because that is so complicated, not to not try and do it, but that it's really going to be all about your network. So you need to meet other writers who are possibly doing this, go into screenwriting programs, meet other people, sign up for contests. That's a really great way to get noticed. So there's a few national screenplay contests that, you know, are fairly cost effective. You could probably, you know, enter a contest for 25, 30 bucks sometimes, but if you rank in those and you have something to say in your letter to a manager or to an agent, that might be really helpful as well.
Okay. Now, Judy said that you do a screenwriting class. Is it at the downtown library, or where's it at?
No, we actually, so the Salt Lake Film Society is a nonprofit film institution, and our project that we did is the Utah Screenwriters Project. Okay. So that project was also a project where we took submissions. We did 10 projects, I think we did. We've since pivoted to our Media Accelerator Studio program, MAST Studio. There, you can check that out at maststudio.org. And we do occasionally have writing contests on there as well. But those pop up about once a year. We call those our springboard contests, but we haven't done a Utah Screenwriters Project in about 3 years because we launched MAST. But when we were doing those, we did have them for Utah writers, and they would apply, and they would apply with their idea and a writing sample. And then we accepted a cohort of about 30 writers. And then we put those writers through a workshop-based project, which fostered them and allowed them to get to know people like my director friend who directs Walking Dead. And, you know, they got to hear from professionals in the industry on what to do next with their screenplays. And more importantly, they finished their screenplay. That was sort of the goal. The hard thing is getting to the end and actually having a script. So that's first and foremost the focus of that project. We haven't had that project in a few years, but it was here locally for Utah.
Okay. So there's writing groups that fiction writer authors join. Is there something like that for screenwriters?
There are a few around, but they're mostly online projects and programs, so you'd have to search for them. Occasionally, if you get to a national project, you're usually just submitting a screenplay for awards or something. I mean, Project Greenlight was one that was out there that was everybody sort of submitted their screenplay and, you know, had other people reviewing it and things like that. Those projects are more rare. So finding a network of other screenwriters, you know, it is a little bit challenging. It's a quiet, I mean, writing is a quiet, you know, activity that you do by yourself. So it's not something that's easy to network with.
Right, right. Well,
so I have one question. Yeah. On the website, you said maststudio.org or mast.org?
Maststudio.org.
Okay. I want to make sure and get that on our information. Okay.
And isn't there something on the master classes? I know you mentioned that to me, that maybe they have directors or somebody talking about.
Well, yeah, in terms of resources while you're learning, masterclass is really the top-notch thing to commit financially to right now, because you can learn from screenwriters from Spike Lee to Neil Gaiman, who's also really actually a novelist, and he also then adapts his own works to the screen. Shonda Rhimes, who's behind Bridgerton, has an entire thing on how the writer's room in Hollywood works. There's one with Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing, and you know, really is probably the best one in terms of trying to think about your story and structure and writing through a screenplay. So so that's really sort of the upper echelon. I mean, you know, it's wonderful in this digital world that we can get access to these kind of brains, and you know, normally you could go through 4 years of college in the past and never have access to Aaron Sorkin. So that's, you know, that's really tough.
So Tori, do you have a favorite book that you've read that's turned into a TV series or a movie?
Well, I mean, so if I thought of all the romance ones, Pride and Prejudice is definitely my favorite of all things that have ever been adapted. And my favorite adaptation is Joe Wright's with Keira Knightley. But there's a lot of good ones that if you're a novelist, you can tell how they took it from writing the novel, which is very in the brain, and sometimes even the characters, the entire novel, it's in their brain, and then taking that and putting it on screen where people are speaking dialogue. And some of those examples, I'd say Atonement is a really good example of that. Cold Mountain and English Patient, Michael's novels are all take place in the head. So to watch what a filmmaker does to take that to a script is really fascinating, and you can read those scripts online as well.
Okay.
Wow,
And-
we could talk for hours on this, couldn't we, Mary?
Yes,
Our time
and
is up.
just one thing on master classes, I'm going to go with you. That's highly recommended. I'm on my second year on those. And Alan Zorkin, I've watched him probably 5 times.
Yeah.
Same with Shonda Rhimes. So,
Yeah.
and you can get everything from Spike Lee to Ron Howard's good, even though it's not a screenplay. You get
Yeah.
your pacing. So anyway, okay, I'll shut up now.
We really appreciate you coming by, Tori. And by the way, guys,
Thank you.
this is my daughter, and I'm so proud of her.
Aw, thanks.
And as you should be.
Time out.
Yes,
and
thank
joining
you
us.
so
Happy to-
much. And we wouldn't mind having you back on something else with screenwriting or anything, maybe in maybe 6 months or so,
Yeah, no problem.
if
Great.
you have time.
Yes, I can always make time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Yep.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.